Hold on
On.
one
Oh,
second. We
sorry.
just,
Okay.
what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Run Your Mouth podcast. We've got a special edition coming at you. Jane Menton, New York City. Go follow the new Twitter account where we've got the new information coming your way of the actual regulations they're bringing to New York City, to starve out the poor, because let's be honest, that's what they're looking to do. Jane, I know you from Gene's incredible Soho Forum debate series, where I know you do some of the work behind the scenes. But why don't
Yep.
you introduce yourself to the Run Your Mouth listeners?
I'm Jane Menton. Robbie and I go way back from the Soho Forum, where I'm the operations head. And about a year and a half ago, I also joined the co-op board of my Queens co-op, which is in Sunnyside. Um, just wanted to get like a little bit more into the community here and help out where I could. During my first month on that board, I found out about this local law 97 that's going to have just a tremendous, catastrophic impact on the city. And since I first found out about it, I've just been fighting it like a mad woman. I started these new social accounts basically as a place to collect all of the information about why this law uh, can't work, won't work. It will bankrupt people. It will leave them without heat in the wintertime. So I'm really excited to just kind of get into the specifics of that so people know about it.
Great. So one of the things, well, first, before we hop in, just let's throw Gene some juice. What's the next debate we
Oh,
got
yeah.
coming up? What's the
Gene's
what's the next one
actually
lined up?
debating.
Right. Oh yeah, those are
He
always
yes,
spectacular.
yes. He is debating Andrew Koppelman on the libertarianism has been corrupted by greed, selfishness, and disdain for the weak. Andrew wrote a book that basically that's the thesis of it, and Gene saw that, read the book, and was like, "Oh no, I can tear this to bits," and invited Andrew to debate him. They made it happen. That's taking place Monday, May 22nd. Tickets actually are selling really fast for that. Everyone loves to see Gene get in the ring. So if you're interested, go to thesohoforum.org. You can get tickets to the live event, the reception, and our live stream on Monday, May 22nd.
And I feel like the last debate he did against Wolf, I forget the guy's name, but in terms of
Oh, Richard Wolf, yeah.
Richard Wolf, in terms of just arguments for liberty, I mean, the amount of views that got on YouTube, that was a pretty spectacular argument for liberty, the last one.
That one has 5 million views on
Yeah.
YouTube. It's actually the most watched video on all of Reason TV, which is,
That,
yeah, something that we're really proud of.
Amazing stat. All right, so I've been railing quite a bit about ESG scores and this green energy revolution because what I see is just I've summarized it down to just a couple words, which is the elites don't want to compete, and that's all it is. So they create these new regulations where they basically guarantee their profits for basically goods and services that don't create value, actually rob you of your wealth. They drive up the expenses of things such as energy and other products and services that you need in your life, which can have catastrophic effects for the poor if the implementation is too aggressive. And what I keep seeing, and we're going to delve into the specifics, so I'll give it back to you in a second, is that it seems like the central planners don't even have their homework done of trying to initiate these policies. Like they're just thinking, it's almost like I think this is the failures of having faked the moon landing, is that they have this idea that government can just say, hey, we're going to accomplish something, and then everyone will just fall in line, magical pieces will arrive, and we'll just create solutions, and it will all just magically work out. But if you just get smart people to break down the numbers, you can look in and go, this just doesn't work. The energy grid does
Yeah.
not support everyone being on an electric vehicle. We don't have just literally people aren't going to be able to start showing up to work. So I know that there are new regulations specific to New York City that go beyond just, hey, you can't have your gas stove, you're going to have an electric one. So maybe you can tell us some of the specifics of like the new laws they're looking to implement.
Yeah, the widespread adoption of electrification, the city's engineers, which is the New York ISO, are the engineers that run the city's grid, and they have been saying that between um, retiring our natural gas generators and pushing, really forcing this adoption of electric transportation and electric buildings, um, are we're going to have unreliable electricity in New York City, where they're going to see deficiency in the reliability starting in 2025. That's only 2 years from now. And meanwhile, our politicians just forge ahead as if the engineers aren't warning them that this is a huge mistake. I find that to be just completely baffling. And it's a really confusing situation to me, where I'm like, why would politicians do something that will ultimately make them look bad? Like, when this fails, how is that going to do anything but make them look bad? So I don't even get it. There is
So
right
just
now.
I want to ask about that specific point, because that sounds really sharp. So even without an increase in current energy consumption in New York City, with other regulations just to retire current energy sources, we're going to have energy problems in New York City by 2025.
That's right.
Is that this? And what's fascinating about that is that if you think about it, if they're also looking to increase electricity usage by moving your stoves, I don't know how much energy is actually used by your stove, but if they're trying to get your cars, you know what I'm saying? If they're actually looking to make changes to even increase the energy consumption, and that we don't even have currently enough electricity, that just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And I've been now in meetings with politicians. I spoke with our Queensborough president, which is Donovan Richards, and I have spoken with New York City Accelerator, which is, they basically have a contract from the city to help buildings go through this process of electrification. And they are all saying, you can totally electrify your building. Our summer peak for electricity use is 42% higher than our winter peak. So we have 42% of space before we'll even run into problems. So you go ahead and electrify. That's 42% is not a lot of space, especially if you're trying to do all this electrification on the same timeline of LL97 has a deadline of 2035. That's when they want all of us to have retrofit electric heat to our buildings. How fast are they expecting that they can build out the grid to match that demand? That's insane. It doesn't even make sense. But further,
let's break it down. So what is the LL97 law?
The LL97 law is a carbon emissions cap on buildings over 25,000 square feet. So they are saying that by 2030, it's it goes in stages. So by 2030, they want a 40% reduction in carbon emissions. And by 2035, they want a 60% reduction in carbon emissions. And they're trying to hit net zero by 2040. And it's putting a lot of pressure. Basically, the only way a building can reduce their carbon emissions by 60% is by turning off their natural gas heat and converting to electric heat, because natural gas heat typically accounts for about 75% of a building's carbon emissions. So they're forcing, they'll say oh, by 2030, all you have to do is change your lights to LEDs and I don't know, upgrade your something silly, upgrade your water system. And it will be $2,000 here, $4,000 there. But the end line, the end game of this law is that buildings have to electrify their heat. And if you don't get started on that process 5 years in advance, you're not going to meet the deadlines, because it's a huge renovation.
Okay. And so this law already passed. This is now true for every building in New York City. And so
yes,
that seems to me, I mean, buying a house, buying an apartment, even I just rent my apartment, just the financial decisions that you make, particularly in terms of where you live, they're very costly and kind of sticky. If you actually go through the process of getting a mortgage so that you can buy your apartment, yes. I mean, it's not that easy. I can pick up tomorrow and leave my apartment, and I'm a single dude. I still have a ton of just bullshit here that would be annoying to pack up. It's always annoying to find a new place. It seems unbelievable to me that the government can come along and just pass a law that could create an extravagant cost on you. That I mean, I don't even know, what would the cost be to you to suddenly switch from gas to electric? And then it's also what other laws are they just going to pass in 2 months from now that all of a sudden you turn around and you're you just turned my investment in my house negligible because now nobody wants this thing because you got to go spend $100,000 just to live here.
It's going to create a housing like collapse in New York City if it goes through. The costs are enormous. So we had an engineer come and go through our building and basically tell us what we had to do to comply with this law. To put in the heat pumps is a $3 million for our building for the heat pumps, not including bringing the electricity like into our building to support the heat pumps, not including like opening people's walls, like everybody's walls in their apartment to like bring the electricity into their apartment to make this possible, not including like the just emotional burden for every person being displaced by this renovation. But yeah, I mean, a $3 million renovation for residents in my building is easily a 20 to 30% increase in like monthly maintenance charges, a couple $100 a month. And that's before electricity prices. I mean, probably this already, but electricity prices, because we're trying to move to renewable electricity, are increasing all the time. We had a 30% increase in our electricity prices this past winter. So you're like, with that on top of the renovation price, cost of living for people living in my apartment building could easily be $600 to $1,000 more a month.
As a comment on electric heat, my current building has electric heat, and for the past 3 winters, I've prided myself on that I basically never turn it on. I mean, never.
Wow.
And occasionally I'll put it up to 50. And that was because one month I got a bill, it was like $300 or something. I was like, you know what? I don't need heat that bad. Fuck this, right? And then I was also thinking,
yes,
this is where I'm just a serial killer. I started thinking, you know what? I bet I can just get used to it. And there is like, to some extent, you kind of adjust. And then I was like, and I don't run air conditioner in the summer. And I had like this kind of military philosophy, which is like, if you can just adjust at home, like what I like about it is I'm very rarely complaining about temperatures. I feel like that's a very Jewish thing. You walk into, oh, it's so cold in here, it's so hot. Like, so I feel like by living in a home that's uncomfortable, I just adjust to the temperature. And then I'm like, I'm less, but I've learned, I think this will be the last winter I do that, because like when it started getting nicer out, like this, I was like, oh, I think I was depressed all winter because I was cold.
Yeah.
It
is depressing. But wait, let me ask you.
Yeah.
So you do that even when it's like 20 degrees outside?
So no, there's like a metric. I'll keep the apartment at about 50. So like if it gets down, this is, I know this is crazy. If it gets to a point where my hands are actually cold in the apartment, like if my hands are cold,
you are crazy.
then I'll put it on to 50. But that's the metric of like, oh, I got to go put that on. If not, put on a sweatshirt, wear your winter hat, buckle up.
Oh my gosh! Well, then you're ready
I'm trying
for
to make
the oncoming apocalypse.
Well, yeah, I was joking quite a bit to I know I have a big German listening fan base when they were talking about that they were going to freeze in the winter because there was no natural gas. I looked at the temperatures. I was like, Germany's not any colder in the winter than here. You got to adjust this now. So if energy prices go through the roof, you're already used to not having heat in the winter. Like if we get to the point where I'm age 70, everyone else is going to be dying off because they haven't spent a whole lifetime, without heat. I've been doing it since I was in my 30s. The point I'm trying to make is no, the point I'm trying to make is I have electric heat, so I can tell you firsthand, it's very expensive. And then I hear about, oh, well, the electric cars, the electric this. I'm like, I don't know. I already have an electric product, and it strikes me like it's a way more expensive alternative. It doesn't strike me as a good product. Like, I've lived in other apartments where I didn't have electric heat. I don't remember having bills this high. And then if you're converting everyone to have to use the electricity over the competitors, it's like I can only imagine what your energy costs are going to be in a month.
Yes. So heat pumps also, they're efficient in like moderate temperatures, 40, 50, maybe even 30 degrees. When you get down into the 20s and the teens, they become increasingly inefficient, which means you're running that much more power to try and get the temperature up to 50. And all that power, of course, costs more money. So yeah, but also like the biggest problem that I foresee with that is that those power surges, when you need to be bringing the temperature of your apartment up to 50 from 17. That's when you're going to be really straining the grid. And that's when you're going to have a blackout. And a blackout in New York City when it's 17, 15, or even 10 degrees outside is going to be a catastrophic humanitarian emergency. Like, especially when you think of these co-op buildings that are, over 10 stories, that means that their water is electric. They have an elevator, obviously, the heat. These are people who cannot get out of their building, like they have to walk, cannot get water into their apartment, like don't have heat. I'm trying to picture how this isn't, like, if you have older people in that building, if you have children and babies in that building, like, how is this not like a nightmare? This
So
is where I'm like,
let's just look at it from the
go.
aspects of the failures of central planning. So to recap, what was firstly the law that I guess changed the first thing that you had said, that the current electric grid is changing in New York, that you said that they're taking off some of like the natural gas.
Yes.
So that's already passed, or like that's set in stone, that's done?
The law, so local law 97 has definitely passed. It was passed as part of the Global Climate Mobilization Act of 2019. The retiring of natural gas generators is a statewide initiative. I've been like trying to figure out like what exactly the law was that passed that like put it into motion. But basically, it's a statewide. It's Governor Hochul's been talking about it. They're going to try and turn the grid from the reliance on natural gas, and right now it's 60% reliant on natural gas to generate the electricity that comes from the grid to your apartment. So
Which
this is another thing where I'm like,
it would sound to me like you would have to look at it and go, hey, look, I got this new nuclear power plant, and so we have enough energy here.
right.
To look at the current energy
Yes.
consumption and just say, I'm going to get rid of where 60% of it comes from without knowing up front, hey, I have an alternative plan, strikes me as batshit crazy. And I guess what their thought is,
It's crazy.
it's the La La Land thinking where they go, well, we'll figure it out. But they're not really going to figure it out. They're just going to drive up costs and basically create profits for the other energy producers and their dumb windmills or wherever the hell it's coming from. I don't even know. But in this case, when it comes to energy costs, like, I don't know, it just strikes me like it will be catastrophic. Like, what happens when people can't actually afford their energy? Like, let's just say that they didn't actually do the building switchover. Let's just look at, they took away 60% of the nat gas. When people start seeing that first month's energy bill and the nat gas supplies are gone, do they revolt? Do they just walk it back and realize, hey, this was a mistake? Like, in their eyes, what's the plan?
I literally don't know, because natural gas generators like need to be properly maintained. Like, this is what happened. I don't know if you remember that Texas storm, that ice storm where they had that
Right.
major blackout. They had not maintained or winterized their natural gas generators. And solar and wind, which they do, like the local politicians that I've spoken to, they do like put that out as the solution. This is what we're going to build a grid on wind and solar and lithium ion batteries, which you don't have never seen a battery big enough to actually be able to do this, but okay. And meanwhile, we're going to retire our natural gas generation. This plan like makes me want to pack up my family and leave New York, because it will not work. And New York City without power is not going to be a safe place to be. So there's no, if we cannot convince politicians that this is insane and must be stopped, it will, like, I do not know what will happen to New York in the future. Like, I do not see like a positive outcome.
Right. So this strikes me like the kind of thing where a Con Edison or whoever is in the business, I don't know who the Con Edison is, but whoever is in the business of, hey, I'm going to build these new battery packs in New York City, or whoever is the construction company that got the license to convert buildings. So I understand why they would sit down with the politician and go, hey, listen, we're going to implement this. And then you get a politician, they're already on the, hey, we got to do the green energy thing. They turn around to people in the area. No one knows about this. I haven't seen the New York Post write about LL97. No one knows. I understand. You get up in front of some board and you go, listen, we need to be green energy in New York City, and this is going to be good for growth because everyone's concerned about the environment. And no one's done any of the homework. No one's done any of the specifics to go, hey, that won't actually work. They basically just lie to them and go, this is a great idea. And so it gets passed. But then when it comes to the
Yeah.
4 and 5 years later, when the people in your building have to actually sit down and they go, oh, they passed a law and now each unit here needs to chip in $30,000 for us to update,
Yeah.
and we don't know what the cost is going to be beyond that. So when the bill comes due and people actually realize, oh, wait, what did our politicians do? Do they then, like, does this just get revoked before it gets implemented? It was just like a nice idea and the central planners kind of fail because they didn't actually do their homework? Or, like, I don't know, what is your forecast of, is there catastrophic failure and then they try and reverse course but they can't even because, they shut down power plants that we needed? Like, what is your kind of 5-year forecast for, I guess, once this formally, I guess, law gets, like, turned on?
This is a very good question and one that keeps me up at night, frankly. So people are waking up to the cost of this, and there are movements now. Like the New York Post just had an article that there's people who represent like 800,000 co-op units who are revolting against the implementation of this law because of the costs. The costs would
Right.
just be so enormous for co-op residents that like I said, it would create a housing collapse, frankly. And so that's good. That's positive. And in the New York Post article, Queensboro President Donovan Richards came out as an ally of that movement, saying, we really need to help the co-op owners. We really don't want to cause like a housing affordability crisis more than there already is. And so like, let's try to get tax breaks or subsidies or some other like grants and guarantees to make sure that this is financially possible to go forward with this law. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is a great like the grassroots movement to stop this law when people understand what's at stake is very strong. That 800,000 units could get behind this so quickly shows that like when people understand how much money it's going to cost them, they want to stop it. My worry is the politicians. We've been sold such a strong fear narrative about climate change. And I believe that our politicians believe it and think that they need to do something, or that they've been voted into their position because they've told their constituents that they are willing to do something big initiative to stop global warming or climate change. And so I'm reading this and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, what they're going to do is they're going to get federal money, all that free money and state money, and write the co-ops a check so that they can go forward with these conversions without the financial blowback. That's not going to solve the grid problem. In fact, that's going to exacerbate the grid problem, because if buildings then are like, great, like I have the money and I can just go forth. When you have that many buildings trying to electrify at the same time, you're going to put so much strain on the grid so quickly that you're gonna burn it out. So I don't know.
I guess this is the side of it that fascinates me. I look at what's going on in France right now, and I don't totally follow French politics. I don't care, but I see what looks like large spread protests over the retirement age going up, I think, 2 years before you can get your benefits. Now, if you just look at like the grand scheme of how many benefits, I know here government's lying to us to pretend like you can have, but they don't actually have the funding for. People kind of, at some point when like the bill comes due, they really don't like that they've been lied to. Like when they turn around, they go, we've been duped. And so I feel like we have more socialism in this country than we actually like realize that we're living with. And it's just central planning. It's government not actually doing the math on, like, you know what I mean? They just think they can wave a wand and go, hey, we're going to go all electric. And then you get people that actually sit down and they do the math and they go, okay, well, 60% of our electricity is coming from this source. So what are you doing what's going to be the new source that's going to replace the 60%? Can it replace it at that cost? Okay, then you also have this amount of infrastructure is going to be required. Now, here's the biggest kicker. It's not just this amount of the infrastructure is going to be is going to be required. It's, if you're wrong, did you retire the old system that you can't turn it back on? Like, it seems to me like that's kind of what happened in Germany, is that they got rid of the nuclear power plants. Like, I would think you'd at least want to keep all this stuff as backup. Like, don't burn it
Yeah.
down yet. You might need it. It's almost like if, let's say, you decided to build a bridge right next to the George Washington Bridge. I would say finish that bridge before you
Yeah.
take this bridge down. Because if you're using some new technology and it doesn't work, you might as well have the backup plan. But it sounds like from what you're saying in terms of like maintenance, because I've even heard that with oil refineries in this country, is that if government's signaling that they're basically going to reduce the ability of, like, you got to make major investments in infrastructure that sometimes they're 10, 20-year projects. So I'm sure even like your nat gas suppliers in New York City, they probably make investments that are gigantic and they go, hey, we're going to put this new thing in, but we're going to be able to profit off it for the next 50 years. So I imagine signaling to the market of like, to nat gas electric, like your equipment is not going to be allowed here. They might not
Right.
even be making the necessary investments that I guess if New York City decided to reverse course and realized, oh, this central planning is not going to work, you might actually be in a situation where they're stuck, like they fucked up. It's over.
Well, we're also going to be paying double. Like the thing with Con Ed is Con Ed makes back the money that they invest by charging customers for their electricity. So they're like, "Oh, we're more than happy to keep maintaining natural gas and do all of this renewable building for you. We're just going to make you pay for it. Like you have
Right.
to." So that's where I'm also like, at what point, are they going to say there's a cap on what Governor Hochul and her infinite wisdom is going to say, we're just going to cap the cost and you can't charge people that much for their electricity. And Con Ed's going to say, oh, in that case, I'm not going to maintain the natural gas anymore because what's the point? Like that's where like central planning just has so many different avenues where it can go wrong. I mean, another one is like you need to continually be training people in the skill sets that like know how to do this. So like if people are saying green energy is the future, you're going to get so many more people who are trained in that technology and so many fewer that are trained in dealing with the natural gas plants. And I don't know what that means for the future. I really don't know. I'm
If only
also
we
like
hadn't
if
gone to
our
Russia.
yeah.
I don't know how they're going to sell it. It's like that's part of it is that if they remove the freedom of press, that no one gets to go, hey, look at what these idiot central planners did. Because as we saw
Yeah.
with COVID, you can have vaccines that don't make a lot of sense, mandates that literally ruin people's lives, don't let you go to
Yep.
jobs that don't make sense. They will just plow forward with it and make sure that the alternative information doesn't reach people. And sadly, there's a lot of people out there that are suckers for an official narrative.
It's it's very interesting. It's like one of the things I've been thinking about is how people with good intentions become soldiers for bad ideas. Like I was saying, like I think this global warming narrative has really made people afraid and made people like I have neighbors, like friends in my neighborhood who are like this is like a worthwhile sacrifice for us to make. Like this is so important. The world is going to end. Like our children are not going to
Right.
be okay.
And this carbon
Um
reduction is probably so negligible. I bet if you
oh,
turned
it's
all of
beyond
New York City,
negligible.
yeah, yeah,
It's well, first of all, we're already living with a smaller carbon footprint than like almost any other American. We don't drive. We live in smaller homes. Like we walk to everywhere. We take public transit. Like, what do you want from us? Our carbon footprint is so much lower than the average person. But yeah, exactly what you're saying, which is, I actually looked it up because I was curious. And China's uh, CO2 emissions are like 10 billion tons. And all of the US is like 4.9 billion tons. And what they're trying to do in New York is they're like the goals as stated are like we're going to reduce carbon emissions by 20 million tons. Million. Like this is not going to make a lick of difference. All it's going to do is ruin people's lives. Like
all right. So, how many buildings must just be ignoring this? Like, I would think if I own a single building in New York City and I got this, I might just look at the math and go, I can't afford to do this. I'm just going to play my card that other people. There must be a lot of building owners in New York City that maybe own one building, maybe own two building. I mean, because the math is pretty simple. It's like if I own a building and The government comes in and says that I have to make, I don't know, let's just say, what's like the smallest size building that would fall into LL 97? Like how many units?
I don't know. It's 25,000 square feet.
I
I'm
don't
not
know.
sure how
I
many
can't
units that
visualize
would be.
square feet. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like a one
My
bedroom
building, I
apart
think, is
room. How many?
100. A one bedroom apartment like is probably like 600 to 700 square feet.
And what? And you said it's
So
2,500 square feet. So you're basically looking at a
25,000.
25,000.
Yeah.
Wait, and we just said
So it's big
a one
apartment building.
bedroom's. You said wait, one bedroom apartment is 600 square feet.
Probably. Because mine's a two bed, one bath, and it's like 850 square feet.
Okay, let's just keep it simple. Let's go. A one
Let's keep
bedroom
it simple.
apartment is a
Let's say
thousand square
1,000
feet.
feet. Yeah,
Yeah, just say it's a
exactly.
thousand square feet, and you said it's and what's the metric that you have to convert?
25,000.
Twenty-five
So it's like
thousand, right? So
25.
yeah, I mean that's not. There aren't that many other than like your multifamily units that have been converted. Or I lived in a small apartment building in Astoria that I guess was about 12 units. I have a question for you. This is my Jew brain coming to work here. Can I split my building with someone then and split it between multiple entities? So like if I owned a building that was 50 units, can I sell half of the building to someone else and now declare this as two different buildings?
I don't think, well, so like with co-ops, for example, we have like a proprietary lease. It's like a very complicated, like legal
Yeah, but then couldn't you just
situation.
like couldn't you all just decide, all right, we're ending the co-op and now everyone owns their own unit type? Like, is there going to be legal workarounds that the smart Jew lawyers will step in and figure out so that no one has to actually comply with this?
I don't think so, but I like where your
Okay.
head is at.
See, that's why
I
I got to
like
leave
the idea.
podcasting and become a Jew lawyer.
You can make so much money, but here you are.
Yeah.
Um, but I do want to mention that there are fines associated with local law 97. So if you try to ignore it, basically they hit you with like again, fines that come in stages. So they like start sort of maybe you could pay it and it would only cost like $25 per shareholder to get rid of it. But then in 2030, it's like, exponentially larger. And then by 2035, when they want you to have done this big conversion, I mean,
Right.
no building is getting away with paying less than several $100,000 in fines. So I actually asked our local politicians, like, is this just a carbon tax? Because like maybe they're not actually expecting buildings to convert, but they're thinking we can just turn this into another revenue stream for the city to like get these billions of dollars in fines. And they say that it's not. I mean, I'm unconvinced. I think maybe it is just a carbon tax. But
You see,
they think they're
because
changing
if
the world.
this is kind of what you need. You need every landlord to basically slip a letter under the door of all their units and say, well, you wouldn't want to channel it this far ahead, but you would basically say, next year, I have to increase your rent by this amount in order to be in compliance with this new law so that people at least realize where the rent hike is coming from. But you look at some
Oh
of the
yeah.
numbers of just how many people have left New York City because of I mean, a lot of like big money left New York City. Like, I think I mean, forget the fact that New York City was always running at a deficit. It's always funny when I used to watch like, I don't know if it was the mayor or if it was the governor that sometimes you watch them do, or maybe I just heard Larry Sharp talk about the accounting tricks that they used to pull to say that, hey, we balance the budget. But you already have a massive amount of wealth that's left New York City.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like this sounds catastrophic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if people can leave, that they should. I mean, a lot of the issue is that some of the people in these co-ops are, this has been their home for 30 years. People in my building converted from rental to co-op in 1987, and I'm on the board. Some of those people have been here. They bought their apartment when the co-op like was first initiated, and so they've lived here their entire adult lives. Like this is home for them, and now they're retired, they're living on fixed income. Like it's very hard in that situation to just pack it all up and walk away. But I'm more concerned for them than myself, because I like if they lose their whole life savings and their asset and everything, like it's a lot.
This is what makes the situation so incredibly scary and where I talk about preferred players. So let's say they pass this law and all of a sudden all these buildings become unaffordable and the price value of them drops down tremendously because this law has
Hmm.
basically made them all insolvent. People can't afford
Yep.
to live there anymore. It just doesn't work. And then all of a sudden, let's just throw out a name, a BlackRock or some other big corporate player picks up all these assets and basically gets the law changed. And now they go back to their previous value. Like laws like this are almost a good way of robbing, like like literally just robbing people of their wealth. Like you look at just the theme of you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, this is
Yeah.
the way that big corporate players can actually literally, it's like the old story of having your farm stolen by like the whatever, you know what I mean? Like this is the way that it
Yes.
happens. Government passes a law that erodes the value of your asset and then they change, and then basically you can't afford to keep it anymore, and then they just change the law. It's like, imagine like water rights in a town. If you were a farm, they just turn off, they go, hey, this river's no longer servicing this area. And then you go, oh, I'm going to lose my farm. And then a big corporation buys the farm, and then
Right.
the government goes, oh, we're going to have water in the area again.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that happens, is that these buildings face foreclosure and have to be bought by, I mean, these homes face foreclosure and have to be bought by banks. That does
And then
ultimately make sense.
you'll see the law change, or you'll see a carve out for whatever reason that these banks, because of their other investments in green whatever, that's what you'll see. You'll see your preferred players will get a carve out.
It could even be that the government takes over the buildings because NYCHA is completely exempt from this law,
What's
and all
NYCHA?
government buildings. NYCHA is New York City Housing Authority.
Wait,
All of the
so
projects, basically. They've carved out their own projects and
right,
their own government buildings
because
and
they
left the
understand that it's
private owners
unaffordable and won't work.
completely, completely. Yes. Or they're like, "Oh, we couldn't possibly. We have no idea how to even get started, but you, private homeowners, like the only productive class in the city, you have to figure it out."
All right,
It does
so
it's crazy.
let's just quickly recap. Central planning doesn't work. We used to live in a free country, so
We used
luckily
to.
we
Yeah.
weren't communist China or communist Russia, where people starved to death because of decisions that were made in terms of the way they were going to allocate food and other resources. It's amazing the extent by which the people who believe in central planning don't even sit down and do their homework to do basic forecasts of where are you replacing 60% of the energy. How do you expect consumers to be able to convert their buildings? What are you going to do when you get rid of a energy supply and you increase the demand for the other one? How are people like it's just three couple questions to
Yeah.
go, how can this possibly function? And you're like, what goes on in these meetings that nobody does any forecasting? Like I would think you would need, like the same way you get an architect or an engineer before you build a building to go, yeah, we worked it out. There's not going to be an exit on the second floor that just goes into the, you know what I mean?
Goes to the
We don't want,
street. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like or hey, this is how much weight a bridge can hold before we're going to put cars on it. Like you would go, how much energy does the city currently consume? How much is it going to need? Where are we going to get it from? Like it just seems like it would be very simple forecasting.
Yeah.
And from I guess what I'm seeing and reading, they just don't do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I just wanna add to that that, like, if the city grid requires natural gas to work, why are they saying buildings can't use natural gas to heat their homes? Like, if you're just burning the natural gas somewhere else, but it's, like, less efficient to burn it over here and generate the electricity that you then heat the home with electricity than to just let the home be heated with natural gas. It literally makes no sense.
Right. Okay, so I think we covered the I think the wide scope here, and I just really wanted to
Yes.
give people an insight into there are, because I keep just yelling, hey, there's these ESG scores, there's preferred players, they're trying to rig the game so that they can make profits, and I very rarely come in with like the actual specifics. You came out to my show every Wednesday, Cafe Bohemia, come hang out, and you were saying, New York City passed this LL97 law, and this is a real thing. This is my building is confronting a catastrophic price increase of that we have to convert to something that makes no sense and will make zero dent in terms of trying to curb this supposed global warming fatal phenomenon. So I think it's so good to hear, like, yes, there are real laws, there is central planning at play, and it is having real life effects on people. Before we call it an episode, was there anything else on this that you thought people should be aware of that maybe we didn't cover?
I think we covered pretty much
Hell yeah.
everything. I'm trying to get a rally together in Western Queens for mid-June. So everyone should follow my Jane Menton NYC social accounts to stay up to date on this fight that we're doing in Queens.
Very cool. And then once more, what was the date of the next SOHO Forum?
Monday, May 22nd.
Monday, May 22nd, Gene Epstein. I look forward. Sadly, I'm going to be down in Texas. I'm doing Childerberg that weekend, but I can't wait to watch that video online.
Thank you, and hope to see you at a SOHO Forum soon, Robbie.
Absolutely. They're always fun. I get to eat some snacks, or I used to be able to eat some snacks in the back.
Yes.
It's a different setup now. All right, that is our episode. Hang out for a second, Jane. Thanks everyone for joining
Okay.
us.
Thank you.